The approach that most churches take to hiring designers and other creative positions is outdated, expensive, and most of all, completely impractical. In this series, we are going to discuss the good, better, and best approaches to hiring creatives at your church. I'm your host, Luke Clayton, and welcome to Church Media HQ. So there's a good chance that you have been handling the bulk of your church's media needs yourself. And you probably realize that you don't have the bandwidth to keep up with all of these needs effectively. You know, you might try one of those library online resources where you log in and you can pick from thousands of graphics to download, and those can be helpful, but ultimately you're still the one who has to do the work so that you can make it happen. You've still got to download that file and rework it to work for you. So it's still a lot of work. So you can't keep up with these overwhelming demands on your own. It's just not going to happen. Things are going to start falling through the cracks. It's just not pretty. So if you're at this point, then that means that you're ready to start delegating these media needs to someone else. And so first of all, I want to congratulate you on coming to this very crucial realization. No organization of any kind can grow without delegation. This isn't a leadership lesson necessarily, but it's just something crucial to realize, and it's very crucial to understand in particular, regards in particular to your creative and media needs. So the good, better, and best approaches to delegating your media and creative needs. That's what we're going to be going over in this series. So let's get started with the good approach. And that is to perhaps delegate to a volunteer. Now, this, of course, isn't technically hiring at all, and it's a pretty common approach in churches in general. Churches and healthy, growing churches tend to have volunteers of all kinds. And, and really from a financial perspective, why would you pay someone when maybe someone else is willing to do it for free? Delegating can work for some creative fields, but it should be avoided for others. Here's some situations where it can work. When it comes to like your worship audio visual operation, the lighting, the soundboard, things like that, maybe even live stream equipment, interacting with church online, interacting using the chat feature, something like that. Maybe you've got someone who can do content proofing or editing, before you got something you're going to publish, they can actually proofread it. Many times there's often some really great photographers or maybe even videographers in the church that are willing to take photos and stuff like that. This is all really great positions potentially that could at least be partially filled by some type of volunteer. But you got to make sure you do your research. You got to ask them the questions about their experience. And you don't want to just, oh yeah, I'm a photographer, and they show up with their iPhone. Well, we can all do that, and there's some people out there that can take really great photos with their iPhone, but you really need to ask them about experience and be willing to ask them for a portfolio. Say, well, I'd like to see a portfolio of your work, because if they are, have been doing it for any period of time, in terms of, for example, I'm thinking of photography. Let's use that as an example. And if they genuinely are pursuing this as some type of, maybe side job or something like that, and maybe it's beyond just a hobby, or even if it is like a high-level hobby, well, they should have some sample work to show you. They should have a portfolio of work to say, oh yeah, here's what I've done. If you're going to delegate to a volunteer for anything, don't just blindly hand them the reins. Make sure that they do genuinely have experience and expertise in the area, because many times it could be tempting. You're drowning and you just want to hand it off, but you can get yourself into a really sticky situation if they don't know what you're doing. Now, here are some areas where delegating to a volunteer doesn't work, and it really needs to be avoided for. That's going to be the primary design and branding of your church, because in most cases, the more distance and detached a designer is from your church, that can often be a good thing. I'm not saying it always has to be the case, but it actually can be a good thing. And another thing that you want to consider with this is if you delegate this to a volunteer, for example, and maybe it's something with the branding or development of a website or something like that, here's something you have to remember. You cannot fire who you did not hire. You can't fire who you didn't hire. So anyone that says, "Oh yeah, I'll be your designer," or "I'll do your website," and I see this, it's pretty common in churches in particular. But the problem is that they come in and they say, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to, do your website for you," for example. And then, something happens. They're not getting things updated on time and they're falling behind. Well, it's really hard to fire someone that you never hired. And so these big things that are really crucial to your church's, promotional and creative marketing, such as your website and even your main brand, that really needs to be left to a true professional that you're actually paying, because that way, if they drop the ball, you can let them go and move on. And then another area that you don't want to delegate to a volunteer is anyone who's providing oversight or vision of creative content in that type of leadership capacity. Again, this is not to say that we want to limit volunteers from their capacity of, leading others. That's not what this is about. This is about a very particular department when it comes to your creative and your media and your marketing. This job of oversight and general direction, like talking about, hey, leading the whole creative department, if you will, that is definitely something that needs to be left to someone that you can at least pay. Because again, if there's anybody that you want to be able to have that fallback, obviously this is worst case scenario, but have that fallback of needing to let them go or make a transition, it's the person who is kind of leading the department. And so you want to be able to have that liberty to let them go. And also they're going to be able to give, they're not going to be able to give the time and attention that is needed when they are a volunteer in terms of, actually leading and so forth. So I would say if you are going to do that with, you do want to give somebody in your church maybe that type of leadership, well, consider at least giving them some part-time pay, and then also determining maybe some term limits or contracts, agreements like that, so that things actually, so that way, again, you're able to actually, work with that person, because they're the wrong-spirited volunteer, the unhealthy volunteer says, well, you're not paying me, so I'm going to do what I want. And this just helps you avoid that situation. So the bottom line is leaving your primary creative media and marketing responsibilities to a volunteer. That can put you in a position where your church is limited in its capabilities for excellence. So the dream of most church leaders is to eventually reach a point where you hire an in-house graphics guy or media director or media team. And I have seen this, it's a very common, if you will, desire and ambition that I see amongst many, many church leaders out there and pastors, because that's what they're seeing in the big churches, the mega churches. That's what they're doing. They have entire teams of people that just produce their graphics and their videos, and it is a fantastic kind of dream. But really, we have to think about reality. We have to think about where you are at right now. And so, with that in mind, I want to talk about this concept of just hiring full time. And if we're going to hire full-time, we're going to hire a full-time creative professional, well, we have to consider that there's actually two breeds of creative professional. The first is the self-taught volunteer or guy who's already on your staff that's just kind of learning it on his own. And the second is what we would consider the trained professional who actually, got educated in it or has worked for an agency or something like that, a creative agency or firm. And so the advantages of hiring this trained professional is that they should be really, really good at their job, and they could really take your church's media to the next level. and in the area of investing into the right hire can be a game changer for your church. So I'm not going to hide the ball on that one. If you hired the right creative professional that was truly good at what they do, I mean, it could absolutely revolutionize your outreach, your marketing, and it could really help your church grow. But there are some downfalls to consider when it comes to hiring a true creative professional. Oftentimes, this trained professional, they enter into a career of creative marketing and media, and they're hoping to make a high income while pursuing what they love to do. Here is just a little bit of a breakdown of salaries that certain creatives expect. So with a graphic designer salary, if they have less than 5 years of experience, they're expecting to make upwards of $50,000 a year. If they have over 5 years of experience, well, they're going to be looking to make $58,000 or more a year. If you're a web app or developer, what they would call a junior web developer, meaning that they don't have a lot of experience or just getting started. Well, even for that, they're looking for $50,000 a year. And if somebody is a high level and they really know what they're doing in web development, the average salary is $75,000 a year, and the high, if you will, the upwards kind of peak is up at like $125,000, sometimes more a year. For a videographer or a producer, the entry level is about $45,000 or so. The average is about $75,000, and if you're looking for that experienced expert, they're looking for $100,000 plus. Let's talk about a social media manager. They would be, on average entering in at about $45,000, and if they're experienced, they're looking for more like $80,000. A creative media director, so someone who oversees the whole department. Well, the average about $88,000, and many times this is what your graphic designer is looking to become. They're entering as a designer or something like that, a position like that, and they're looking to become more of a creative director. And so the average, like I said, $88,000 and upwards of $158,000 for an experienced creative director. So you have to count these costs, and these creative professionals, though you might find exception, rarely are going to, if you will, work for cheap. A creative professional will also likely only want to work in their specific field. So if you're looking for more of a multi-purpose employee, this may not be the ideal choice. So in other words, if you say, I want somebody who can just do design, web, video, they can do it all, well, many times they say, no, I'm just a designer. That's all I do. I do graphic design. Or you might say, I need somebody, it's even more broad. You say, I need somebody to handle all those media needs, but I also need them to be a youth pastor or a worship leader or something like that. Well, the creative professional is going to say, oh no, that's way out of my wheelhouse. I do my design, or I do video, I do web. And so these are things you have to, again, consider. Another thing is that creative professionals are really good at what they do, and many times they tend to know it. And so what you could run into is sometimes and this is not universally true, but I am a creative professional, and so I am speaking from a little bit of my own pride. A lot of times you can run into this situation. I was very much this way, especially in my early days, that you don't really, you say, no, I'm good at this. I'm the one who's getting paid to do this. I'm educated in this. I've got the experience. And so you're kind of unwilling to hear others' feedback, and it can be very difficult sometimes for the creative, the artist, if you will, to execute somebody else's vision. They just kind of want to execute their own vision. And so this is just something to keep in mind. A lot of times this is a creative professional. This is the mindset that they can tend to bring. And look, I am in this world, but I will say I have worked with many, many creatives, and they all of us have a little bit of this in us, and some is much worse than others. And if you want to hire a true trained creative professional, you've got to have significant room in your budget, and be prepared that you will likely get someone who is very, very specific in just working in their particular field. So these are things you have to consider. Again, the budget matter, and then the matter of you're probably not going to get this all-in-one dream employee that can just do everything for you, whether that be media or beyond. The trained professional is too expensive for your church. Yeah, that's typically the case. In fact, hiring a trained full-time professional it's just a pipe dream for nearly any, and not just churches, really any organization, businesses and whatnot. Hiring somebody full-time, I mean, it's reserved for kind of like the big dogs, if you will. However, there is another form of creative professional that may more likely be an option for you, and that is the self-taught volunteer, or maybe someone who's already working for you on your staff. And this is essentially the person who has taught themselves through YouTube, Google, and they just kind of figured it out on their own. And look, I'm going to go through some pros and cons, but I'm just going to be the first to say I love these guys because I am one of these guys. I have no formal training on anything in terms of creative media. I think I took like one class in college that kind of touched on it, but I have no degrees, nothing like that. I mean, everything I have done has been self-taught, and I often like to make the joke that if I could get credit hours based off of like the amount of YouTube videos I've watched and so forth, then I'd have a PhD in what I do, because all I have done is just learn on my own. So here are some pros of working with someone who's more self-taught. Well, they're going to work at a much more affordable rate because many times they are learning on the job. And so they are going to, work at that more affordable rate and not going to, want near and expect near as much as the trained professional would. They're likely going to be more willing to take on more responsibility because, again, they're learning on the job, and they're saying, okay, yeah, if I can learn something about, I've got Photoshop down, but I want to learn Illustrator better. Yeah, sure, I'm game. I'm game to give it a try, or I'm game to even try some video work or whatever it may be. And so they're going to be likely more willing to take on responsibility. But this can actually be a con because they will be prone to take on too much due to that lack of experience and just not understanding, the time required for certain projects. The media, the tech guys, they are often the most overworked members of your team. And look, this comes from, this is coming from a heart of experience. Like, this has been me. And then due to that overwhelm or lack of experience, and sometimes even, unfortunately, a lack of talent, because I will say you can learn a lot of this, but there is a level of talent needed that just tends to come naturally, and not all people have that. So due to, this overwhelm, lacking that experience, lacking the talent, the quality of work can be maybe good, but not great. That said, some guys, they discover this talent and they really wind up being very, very good. So you're really rolling the dice, if you will, in terms of you're kind of taking your chances. You're saying, hey, this guy's interested, he's willing, he's got a Mac, so he must know how to operate, Photoshop and create cool stuff and videos, right? And so you give him a chance, and but hey, and then again, you're risking that chance of them being overwhelmed and not knowing how to handle certain things, not understanding the time commitments that are going to be needed to get things done, and so things start falling through the cracks for those reasons. Or maybe they're just not good. They're not as good as a true professional would be, and so things just like I said, they're kind of lackluster maybe. So again, you're kind of rolling the dice here, and many times though, when you do find someone who is good and they wind up being good at what they do, they discover this talent. And the overwhelming workload on top of, kind of discovering their talent, or maybe a combination of both, they lead to them resigning their position. So this is my story. And mine was more due to the overwhelm. It was just having to do with my things affecting my personal life. And I was working at a church and I had to leave. And it wasn't the church's fault. It was my fault because I was taking on too much and was overwhelming myself. And I know so many other creatives that this has happened to. I mean, I could name literally off the top of my head right now, I could probably name 5 to 10 guys that I know that this is what happened to them. And so this happens pretty commonly, and like I said, there's different reasons for why. Like I said, for me it was overwhelmed, but I know other guys that it was more for them about the fact that they realized, hey, I have this talent, and so now I'm going to essentially go and actually make a little bit more income than I can here working at this church. So this is just, again, stuff you have to consider. And speaking of considerations, when you're considering hiring this position as a church, your team, your media team there, whether they're volunteer or paid, you have to keep this in mind, that they're going to be serving in really one of two kind of domains. There is the ministerial domain. This is, the teaching, the preaching, greeting, worship, music, kind of the front-facing stuff, if you will, kids ministries, small groups, doing counseling, stuff like that. This is like kind of true ministry, and like I said, it's a little more front-facing. And then there's the operational stuff that's more behind the scenes. Your finances, budgeting, HR, your office and administrative, organization, scheduling, technology, IT, and then this is also where that creative media and marketing fits. And there's certainly going to be overlap between both of these domains, but when it comes to hiring, I have found that it's most ideal to hire exclusively for one or the other if possible. If you need someone to do both, then hire someone to oversee and direct rather than actually do the work. So in other words, instead of hiring someone to actually be your graphic designer and be your videographer, but also be your youth pastor and do all the work that involves and all of those things I just described, you would say, well, hey, I really want you to be worship pastor. I want you to be worship leader, whatever it may be. But I am going to have you also just oversee our media department, taking more of a leadership role and a role where they would then delegate than actually, going in and doing the actual work. So here's some questions you have to ask. Can your church afford the growing rate? Going back to our last episode, can your church afford the going rate of a trained professional? And then when you do make this hire, what are you expecting them to do? Are you expecting them to oversee or to actually do the creative media work? Here's the bottom line. The vast majority of churches do not need, nor will they ever need, a full-time hire to handle their creative media. Now, there's some of you out there, I know that comes as a shock. You think, no, again, like that's the dream. But here's the truth. It's not a need for the vast majority of churches. And because here's the thing, even if you consider churches that are big churches, but the truth is that it's only like something like 2%, or no, it's lower than that. It's like 1%. I think it's like 0.5% of churches have run more than 2,000. That's the number. That puts you in the mega church category. These are the types of churches that have the budget to make these hires, and unless you are in that top 0.5%, that's not your church. And so needing to make a hire in this way that is full-time is almost certainly not going to be something that you need. Now, by way of review, delegating your church's media is great for some applications, but not a good idea for areas that require certain levels of talent and skill set. So delegating specifically to a volunteer, it can work in some areas, but we've talked about how others is not a good idea. Hiring someone full-time will often result in hiring someone who is either too expensive, or too inexperienced. So today, we're going to talk about the best approach to hiring for well over 99% of churches. The best approach is this: outsource to a creative professional or team. Now, unless you are in the top 0.5% of churches that has that average weekly attendance exceeding 2,000, you really do not need to hire any in-house creatives. You may need someone to oversee and direct your media needs, but doing the work can and really should be outsourced. Now, look, before I move any further, I understand this seems very self-serving and so forth. I get it. But look, we are not talking about just exclusively working with us here at Church Media HQ, though we would love the opportunity, and we'll talk more about that here in a moment. Really, the point, though, is I've done this so long, and I've worked with many different people who have done this as well. And it's just very easy to arrive to the conclusion that outsourcing to someone who's not a full-time hire is often much more often than not, I should say, the best approach. So here are some cons, though. Let's go ahead. Let's just get it out of the way. Here are some potential cons. The pro will work remotely. They're not going to come to your offices and work there. They're not going to clock in at 8 o'clock and leave at 5. They're going to work remotely, and they're going to require more turnaround time. You're not going to be able to walk down the hall to the office and slap your demand on their desk and say, get this done today, which, by the way, if you hire someone full-time and that's how you're approaching it, that is a surefire way to send that person packing because it will drive them and really you too absolutely crazy. Another thing is that the hourly rate may actually, and will very likely come out to be more than if you were paying someone full time. So if you actually counted up their hours, then, well, yeah, that off-site creative professional that you're outsourcing to, well, sure, they're getting a higher hourly rate than the full-time person, but they're also providing much better quality work and so forth. So it's a investment well made. So here are some pros, though. When we're talking about the cost, the overall cost is actually significantly less than hiring some full-time. I mean, think about it. When you hire someone full-time, you've got, in addition to salary, you've got benefits, health insurance, and all of that stuff that comes along with actual hiring. But when you're outsourcing to someone who's, essentially working as contract labor, you don't have to worry about any of that. And they're not going to be working for you full-time. So you're going to be paying them a lot less. And so the excellence, another pro is the excellence and quality is going to be much greater. Because again, this is that paid or that trained or trained professional or someone who's genuinely good at what they do, then this, and instead of paying them that big fat salary, hey, you're just sending them a significantly less amount, but they're producing excellence in terms of the quality. And here's another pro that a lot of people don't think about. The emotional attachment is greatly, greatly diminished. So they tend to be passionate about executing your vision rather than their vision, because they aren't necessarily involved with your church and they're not, there every day, like I said, coming to an office and whatever. They're not so emotionally attached to maybe what they do. Now, this, again, none of this is 100% true for everybody, but that's often the case. They just want to ultimately make you happy. And from a business perspective, they just want to make you happy because when the client's happy, their paychecks keep coming. You're going to keep paying them. And so oftentimes this is what you find. They are very, very passionate about executing your vision. But at the end of the day, you call the shots. They're going to give you excellent quality stuff that you like. At least they should be doing that if they're a good creative professional. So here is the bottom line. What would have required a full-time on-site position less than 10 years ago? Well, this can easily be a remote contract type of worker that you pay as needed. So what is it going to cost? Well, most freelance creatives, they're still charging by the hour with some type of minimum. So for example, this would be a higher end designer, but just for simple math, they would maybe design for $100 with $100 an hour rather, with a 3-hour minimum. So this means that it's going to be a minimum cost $300 for one project. So it doesn't matter if it takes them 30 minutes or 3 hours, they're getting paid their 3-hour minimum regardless. And this is fair. And here's why. That's because when they go to start that project, there's kind of that, if you will, to them, there's a little bit of startup cost and startup energy that's required. That is really the same regardless, again, of if it takes up 30 minutes or 3 hours. And I'm going to say this too. If you haven't got over the mindset of paying someone for their time versus paying someone for their product, let me help you out just a little bit here. It's not about time, because if I pay someone, for 3 hours of their time, Well, that's okay. But what if at the end of that 3 hours, what they made is garbage? Okay, well then doesn't matter. It's a wasted 3 hours. So I don't be one of these people who demands to see some type of hourly breakdown of all their stuff. That's just an unreasonable thing to ask for, because most of the time, even when they're billing by the hour, yes, that's paying based on their time, but you're also paying for their product. I mean, after all, if someone can design something in 10 minutes that looks better than the guy who would have taken maybe 10 hours, who cares? It's all about the product. So you really should be willing to pay for the end product, not for the individual hourly billing. In terms of what's valuable to you is not their time. What's valuable to you is the product. On the other hand, what's valuable to them is their time. They took the time to make that, and so that needs to be valued as well. But at the end of the day, the product should be what you matter, and you should be willing to pay for good quality. So when we're talking about, so that was a graphic designer in terms of if you were going to outsource it. Somebody's custom web development or design, so they're going to build you a website maybe. Well, that's typically some type of a $2,000 kind of startup cost. And then many times there's some type of additional ongoing billing for support, whether it's some type of monthly rate or hourly rate or something like that. Starting rates for videography for like a video project can be anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 for like a short video. And then many times there's additional costs for, more advanced editing, animation, and things like that. An up and coming model now for creatives is to charge a monthly retainer or subscription. And many times this often requires some type of contract or commitment. So it's pretty common to see like a 12-month contract that comes along with these retainer type of arrangements. And this is often still, many times you're paying a kind of a retainer rate, but they're often still calculating billing by the hour. And then they are actually, many times they will actually deal you additional billing for overages. Remember overages like old cell phone minutes and stuff? You went over your minutes, well, you paid more. A lot of times that's how these creatives are working. That's just something for you to understand. Now, I will tell you this, here at Church Media HQ, here's some things that we do differently than many of the other creative professionals and maybe agencies that you would work with. We're never billing by the hour. We don't do that. We're not going to give you an hourly billing. We're never going to lock you into a contract. And here's what we could do for you. If, in theory, you were interested. Well, we can design anything, from sermon graphics to logos to multi-page brochures. And we have memberships where you can get any of this just unlimited requests and revisions at our kind of our higher levels of service. This is what we do. I mean, we can just do as much for you as you want, but also at the same time, we also have entry level rates where, hey, you say, I don't need unlimited. I just need, a couple designs a month, or maybe just 1 or 2 designs a year. We have a plan for you. So this is something, and something else that we can do, we've helped with, and we've been doing more with it in recent months, in fact, is producing podcasts. We could even produce sermon clips, video announcements, sermon bumpers. And this is all stuff that we are able to produce as well. And again, we have a membership. I am so excited about our recently expanded memberships because, again, we have the membership. We have the plan that helps the church that only needs just a handful of things any given year. And then we have plans that can expand all the way up to the church who's needing things on needing lots of things, if you will, lots of deliverables on a weekly basis. And so, we turn things around quick, depending on the project. I mean, it can just be, we have turnaround that can really just be as quick as just a day or two. And this is all part of what you get with Church Media HQ. We also have priority coaching available to any upgraded membership, which means you can schedule a time to talk with, it's often me, sometimes somebody else, and you can schedule as many of those calls as you want, those coaching calls, to talk about your ideas, your messaging, or talk about upcoming projects. And so with Church Media HQ, this is what we offer. This, in terms of that's our paid level of service. But remember, you can just get started. If you're just looking to start, I've always been a big believer in figure out how you can start for free, and we've provided that for you. Now you can start a new design or web project completely free. There's no upfront cost required. Again, this is so easy. You just send your requirements. We deliver the designs for you to review, and you're only going to pay if you like what you see. And if you do happen to like what you see, and I have a feeling that there's a good chance you will, well, then you can use the code HIRE25, that's HIRE25, and you're going to get 25% off of any membership for up to 12 months. So use code HIRE25 to claim this discount. Look, I just want to encourage you. Even if nothing else, you're starting for free. Please, if you haven't started this delegation process, if you've been wanting to do this, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate any longer. Just start. Again, there's no obligation. It's free. If you don't like our work, no hard feelings. It's all good, but just start something. Take the plunge, if you will. And so I just want to give you that encouragement as we are headed into, at time of release, we are in the Christmas season, and we are headed into the new year. And so this is really the time that you just have to and really need to take advantage of this. Now, I will let you know that we're going to take a break from new content for the remainder of this month. But we'll be replaying a couple of this year's best episodes, might bring you some special content. So we're still going to have some content, but nothing new and fresh. That is until next year, when we will be back with all new content, series, conversations, and so forth. And until then, just remember, stay innovative, keep dreaming, and please don't ever stop creating. And I will see you next time.